A US judge has temporarily blocked a sweeping White House order to pause federal grants, loans and other financial assistance from taking effect. Now, in her first briefing, White House Press Secretary Karoline Leavitt said the freeze would put trillions of dollars on hold to bring spending into line with President Trump's executive orders. Now, Planet America co-host John Barron is with me in the studio to make sense of all this. So, John, what is happening or not happening for the moment, at least in the US?
Yeah, Gemma, it's hard to claim to be able to make sense of it because nobody in the United States really understands how far-reaching this order is. So this is essentially a memo from the Office of Budget and Management, which is telling all of the various federal agencies that we're pausing funding that you then send to the states and to the not-for-profit sector to deliver all sorts of federal programs until we are convinced that we think that all this funding is in line with the President's priorities as articulated through the more than 100 executive orders that he's signed in his first week and a bit in office. There were some exclusions. They made it clear early on that Medicare, which is for typically the elderly only in the United States, healthcare for them is exempt from this, as is their version of the pension scheme, Social Security. That left out Medicaid. Medicaid is Medicare for low-income earners, which millions of Americans rely on for healthcare. So it was excluded. They also said that that this didn't affect benefits paid directly to individuals. Well, that's fine, but most aren't. Most come through federal grants to state agencies or the private sector, charities, to deliver services. And we're talking about any number of services. It could be housing for veterans, it could be drug treatment, it could be police services that receive federal funding so they have a domestic violence officer or a mental health specialist on their staff. All sorts of programs are suddenly potentially affected by this because they really didn't make it clear as to, well, on what basis were we turning off this money tap? And then there are questions, of course, Gemma, which is part of the reason why a judge has now intervened to say, I'll look at this next week, but in the meantime, let's take this pause button off, is to say, well, hang on, the President of the United States has executive powers. He can issue executive orders to say what he would like to happen, and it's Congress that has the power of the purse strings. Everything has to go through Congress if you want to appropriate money. This is money that has already been appropriated by Congress, by people who have a mandate, just as the President does, to disperse this money. It's already been approved. It's already been sent. So when people are now finding at the state level they're trying to claim back on their Medicare costs, the portal has now gone down. They don't know whether if somebody goes to the doctor this afternoon, whether that doctor is going to be reimbursed by Medicaid or not. So there's a huge amount of confusion here, which has been slightly alleviated by this judge intervening. But it is another example, and this is the kind of thing that happened a lot in Trump's first term. These wide-reaching orders would be issued, often quite sloppily written, legally questionable. They would go out there, everyone would panic and go, what's this? And then a judge would intervene and say, well, let's try and figure it out. And the hard work of actually getting the language right and figuring out the exact scope of this will come down now to a judge, not the Trump administration.
And how did the Democrats react to this when it was put forward?
Well, with shock. Not that this is not clearly a part of Trump's agenda and the kind of big thing that he does. And Trump often does these big things that are very unconventional, and sometimes they're very, very effective. He has a history of doing this in legal matters as well. Overreach, make a big claim, such as his sweeping claims of presidential immunity last year before the Supreme Court. In the end, the Supreme Court knocked that on its head, but said, actually, the President does have greater immunity than we previously thought. So it was a partial victory, and we can probably expect to see a partial victory for Trump here again, where the President's powers to say, well, certain funding is at the discretion of the President, not the Congress. So it's going to be fascinating to see, because this is all about making, essentially, the President more powerful and taking control away from Congress, which of course has the influence of the other side, the Democrats as well. The Democrats, for their part, have simply been making statements, going to social media saying, well, here are some of the programs and the charities and the good works that are now defunded, awaiting Donald Trump's verdict to say, are they too woke for us to continue funding? Are we going to put our money somewhere else? Are they stripping away diversity, inclusion and equity programs, for example? Is the military doing enough to ban transgender people from serving, etc.? So there are a lot of questions as to how this is going to affect it, and whether in fact the President has the right to tie funding to his own ideology that he wants to impose on all of these agencies and organisations.